Welcome to this overview of qualitative research methods. I'm a professor with the School of Social Work at Michigan State University, where I teach research methods and proposal writing. My own research focuses on Alzheimer's patients and their family caregivers, in which I have used qualitative research methods and mixed methods. So in this series of lectures, I will draw examples from my previous research to help you understand qualitative research methods. To start with, the goal of this workshop is to help you understand qualitative research approaches and concepts so that you can determine whether qualitative research method fits your research project. And if so, how to design and implement a qualitative research project. Specifically, I will cover 4 modules, including what is qualitative research, how to write good qualitative research questions, what are common qualitative data collection approaches, and what a rigorous qualitative data analysis look like. So welcome to module 4. In this module, we'll cover what is qualitative data analysis and how to ensure rigor in qualitative research. So unlike the analysis of quantitative data, qualitative data analysis cannot be achieved by running a command or clicking on the drop-down menu of a statistics software like SPSS or Stata to get an output. Qualitative data analysis involves an iterative process. You need to dig into the data and then come out and then dig back into the data, which is called constant comparison. It often invites a second or even a third person to co-analyze the data. And together, the research team can resolve any conflict among them and reach a consensus. So coding is the process to organize the data into meaningful ways. Let's start with what is a code. Codes are words or short phrases that represent the essence of narratives or verbal information. It is used to reduce the amount of information into smaller numbers of meaningful units. And the goal of coding is to develop a code book. So this slide presents the coding process. The researcher can start with reading the transcripts and get familiar with the contents and come up with initial codes. After coding a couple of more transcripts, the researcher can revise and refine the code list. After coding 3 or 5 transcripts, that's a rough number, you should be able to develop a code book that can be used to guiding the coding for all the remaining transcripts. One coding approach is called inductive coding, which involves open coding. Without any preconceptions, open codes come directly from your read of the transcripts. The second approach called directed coding, in which the researcher uses a predetermined list of codes drawn from theories, existing literature, or the researcher's expertise. For example, if you study caregiver stress, you already know stress, burden, support, and coping are important concepts. Then you can code around these concepts. An integrated approach allows the researchers to use both inductive and deductive coding in the analysis. I forgot to mention, nowadays you can also use software like Attila's TI or NVivo to help with the coding process. Now let's take a look at an example. This example is from a focus group interview, and the research aim is to understand the stress and coping experience of rural dementia caregivers. And you can see 2 persons' narratives here. And your goal is to code those transcripts. A couple of sentences may catch your eyes here. You can find the caregiver experience, including help with personal care, like help the person put on the shirt, help with their daily living, like driving them to shops, taking them to different places, or comfort them when they feel like down or depressed. So you may have those codes like help with activities of daily living, help with instrumental activity of daily living, or help with emotion. Those are the codes. So after the coding process, you can provide a rich description or develop a theme, depending on your particular research design. Themes are determined as unifying concepts or statements that characterize findings. Normally, we expect, for a research study, 5 to 7 themes will be okay. And we can use visuals, figures, or even tables to present the themes identified. That can be different from each qualitative design. For example, in grounded theory, typically the researcher will present a process model that includes all the themes identified and their relationships. For ethnography, they may present a drawing, and for case study, they may present a table. Let's take a look at some theme examples. These themes are actually also drawn from the rural dementia caregiver study. Here are the 3 identified themes that all related to rural dementia caregiver experience. The first one is talking about transportation barriers is a source of stressor for the rural family caregivers. And the second one is talking about lack of family support or social support. And the last one is the behavior problems of the care recipients. So all 3 themes are related to the source of stressors for the caregivers. Now let's take a look at how to ensure rigor in qualitative research. We all know, regardless with whether you're doing a quantitative study or qualitative study, the goal of researcher is to produce or generate rigorous knowledge that can transform science and practice, right? You want your evidence is grounded in empirical data, and it can be replicable by other researchers. Let's look at some strengths of qualitative research design. So a qualitative research can have some strengths like, it includes a deep and sometimes innovative perspectives of a social problem. It can present the subtle nuance in attitudes and behaviors of a group. Flexibility is another strength of qualitative research. Because it's flexible, researchers can collect data at different time points, and data collection is not set in stone. Also, the researcher do not have to control for comparison groups. That's related to the last strength, which is less costive. It's relatively inexpensive compared to a large-scale survey or experimental designs. But here we are only speaking of financial cost. But in terms of time spent in the field, qualitative studies are not as easy as you thought. You may spend a lot of time observing in the field or spend a lot of time doing data analysis. The time cost is huge. Let's look at some weaknesses of qualitative studies. One thing that people often criticize qualitative research is its subjectivity. If a different researcher analyze the data, will they get the same results? Are those results reliable, trustworthy? Can people replicate, the results? To ensure rigor in qualitative studies, we have to use some strategies. Here are often used 6 strategies during data collection and during data analysis for qualitative studies. The first one is to increase the time spent in the field. You can spend in the field doing observation for a longer time to get more data in the natural setting. The second approach is called triangulation. You have to remember this word. Triangulation means you use different sources of data to collaborate with each other. Say, if you want to study the patient behaviors, you can also get information from family caregivers, the health providers, or even home health takers, rather than rely on the patient's own self-reports. During data analysis stage, you can use other strategies like listed on this slide. You can use these 4 strategies: peer debriefing or support. You can identify some experienced peer researchers and seek their advice and support. And negative case analysis, we touched on this a little bit before. So searching for those deviant cases that are typically not fit into the pattern of existing cases. Member checking. After you draw some conclusions and do some and identify the results, go back to the participants and ask for their feedback and ask them to see whether your interpretations actually represent what they meant. The last strategy called auditing, which requires the researcher to document the trails of the field notes and have detailed documentation of how do they analyze the transcripts. So for qualitative studies grounded in constructionism, it emphasizes the trustworthiness, but in the same time, it acknowledges that there are multiple subjective realities rather than ensuring an objective social reality. If you are using a participatory action design, creating new knowledge is not just sufficient. You have to take one step further and use the knowledge to empower your participants to bring about changes and challenges existing power structure in the society. Tom and his associates published the criteria for reporting qualitative studies. It includes a 32 items along the 3 domains: research team, study design, and data analysis. It is very critical to address those that are applicable to a research design. You don't have to address all 32 items, but find those items that's applicable to a study and address them in your reports. Fei and his associates translated it and applied in the China setting. So you can find Fei's article in the reference list. Here are some take-home messages for this section of qualitative research design. Qualitative research is not intended for generalizability, rather than seeking a rich and deep understanding of a social phenomenon. Common design includes those 5 traditions, and also don't forget, you can do a purely qualitative descriptive study without using any of those traditions. Number 3, qualitative data come from documents, visual or audio files, interviews, and observations. And the qualitative data analysis is not easy. It's quite labor intensive. Trustworthiness of the research process needs to be documented at every step, including the researcher's own reflections on their bias and strengths. So that concludes our lecture on qualitative studies. Thank you for watching this lecture. I encourage you to take time to dig into the concepts and approach we covered in this lecture. In particular, I encourage you to locate and find the references I recommend in the end. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email, and my email address is on the first slide of this lecture. Have a great day.